So I decided that it was time for me to branch out and create some modular trees that'll be easy and also very effective and look great on any tabletop wargaming mat. Now for these trees, I had a few criteria that I wanted to meet in order to make them as good and as cost effective as possible. So that was cheap materials, I wanted to be modular, and easy and fun to do. So to start, I just took some floral wire and we got about 12 strands or so, put them together, bent them around, and just started twisting to get the bark and create some of the branches. Now there's lots of ways you could really go about this, but I found that this would be a really fun and easy method to use. It probably took about 10 minutes for each of these trees and did a little bit different for both of them. I did find that the second one I've liked a little bit more just because towards the end there, I just kept going with the twisting and just left very little pieces instead of these longer ones on this first one, which at the time I had planned to do that as a way to possibly grab a hold of more of the flocking and turf to make the canopy look larger, but ended up being more of an open canopy, which I still think came out great and would be happy to use it. Now with these trees, I did build them to be more modular with their own base for each one and then just a grass turf. But I could also see just using this same building style and materials as a way to incorporate that into maybe some dioramas where you want to put some trees growing off the side of a cliff, or maybe an overgrown castle where there's still just branches and roots going everywhere. I think this would be a great method to do that with, and definitely look forward to trying that in the future. So this is where I was by the time I got done twisting all the branches together. I definitely could have taken all those ends a little bit further, but as I said before, it was an experiment to try to really see where I could take this and push it and what the results would be. So to get those roots, I just went through, cut off the bottom of each of those with some wire cutters, and I began twisting those together into their own little root structure, trying to keep them flat. I did that by pushing them against the base mat there, and just kept working with the shape and structure until I was happy with the final look. So next I took some of this rubber cement and just began to plan that all over the branches and twists. Now initially the goal here was to cover up all the shape of the wire. That did not work as well, but it did work really well to hold all the wire together. The next thing I did was just take this satin espresso flat primer and cover the entire thing, and then took the burnt umber, black and white acrylic paints to create a kind of a warmish gray brown, and then just start dry brushing over the top of all that entire tree, just making sure to go against the structure there to really grab the highlights on all those roots. Now for this, I was really careful to make sure I covered all of the branches and everything, but you really don't have to be as particular, especially once you start getting the flocking on there. You definitely cover up a lot of that up top. Now once that was done, I just took some of this spray adhesive, some coarse turf, and broke that up into a plastic bin, and then put a nice layer of that glue all over the branches there, making sure not to get it onto the trunk of the tree or on the roots there. Next, just pushing that around into the coarse turf, and then grabbing some pieces and just pushing that in where it didn't stick the first time. Now this was kind of a back and forth method where you're going and adding more glue and then going back to the turf and just building up layers until you get to a thickness and coverage that you enjoy and like. Now to give you some advice with this spray adhesive, I would use a little bit more than just one paper towel in the future, because my paint tray there and my desk have a little bit of a texture to it now where all that glue oversprayed and dried. By the time that was done, I did really like the look to it, and then after that I just took some of this real fine flocking and just lightly applied that all over the top to create a nice contrast in color. So now that the trees were done, it was time to move on to the bases. So for that, I took a couple scrap pieces of my XPS foam and kind of just whittled those down to a nice shallow hill where they could sit on top of anything or just out on a board and hold the tree nicely. Now at first I was kind of worried that the weight might be an issue, but by the end of the time they were done, I didn't really have any issues. So after that, just took that torch slider and created a nice smooth texture for it, and then just kind of dry fitted and hot glued these trees in place, making sure to really just bend those roots down around it so you wouldn't have to have them just jutting out all over the place and sticking out in an unnatural way. After that was done, I just took some of the spackling and began covering the entire base with those, making sure to leave the roots kind of showing through the top so they could really look a little more incorporated into this build when it was done. Now I did find the spackling to be a pretty good way of doing this. I'm sure you could also use Sculpt-A-Mold or paper mache if you really wanted to, but this was a pretty quick and easy way to do that. So once that was dried, I took some of just that same gray base paint and began covering all those roots just enough that I could really see them through the top, and then taking kind of a greenish brown mixture of paint and just giving that as the base color all the way through that ground layer. After that, just a light gray and dry brushed over the roots, or that bark again in the roots, just to really drive up that contrast, followed by some of the PVA glue spread out, and then so I could start on the flocking. So for that, I did the same method as some of my other builds where I start with a darker color and then after that go through with a bit of a lighter, kind of more of a yellow and brown mixture, just to really create some contrast and color difference there. Now for the final step, I just took some of my strong tone and began applying that pretty heavily all over the trunk and tree there, just to really drive up the contrast and give those highlights and depths some more variation. Now once that had dried, we could call these trees finally done. So all in all, this probably took about 4 hours to build, not including dry time, if that even. They're very fast and very good project for a weekend or a single day. But I did have a lot of fun building these, and it's definitely something I like to experiment with more in the future. Definitely try some different materials, maybe try like a liquid rubber to go over the tree next time to create more of a bark on it. But ultimately, I was very happy with the final result here. So if you enjoyed this or have any tips or tricks, please let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say and think. Anyways, that's all I have time for in this video, but until next time, keep crafting, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself. If you enjoyed this video, check out one of my other ones. You might also find some great tips there or some inspiration for your future projects. Until then, I hope you have a great day, and thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time spent here.